industry and specific companies. So this information is part of what we are collecting. The other thing I wanted to focus on is opportunities that are currently listed for nuclear engineers. And these are not all the open positions, but these are what some are just a sampling of what is on Handshake. So you can find full-time positions on Handshake, internships, as well as co-ops. So I just kind of chose three that I found. The Naval Nuclear Laboratory is looking for full-time positions as an entry-level nuclear engineer and as an entry-level reactor mechanical engineer. And then I also found an internship for Power Portfolio Nuclear Field Services internship at GE Power Portfolio. So this is all things posted in Handshake, which is our career management platform. So if you have not done so, you definitely want to log into Handshake, activate your account, complete your profile, and begin job searching if you're looking for an Archway opportunity or just an internship or co-op for your own experience or a full-time position. There are plenty posted in Handshake. So this is just a sampling of some of the places that are currently hiring for nuclear engineers. So some salary statistics. So from the class of 2018, which is the last, we're still working on compiling 2019. So we are a little bit like a year behind. But the average salary of those reporting for nuclear engineers, the average was 68,250. And of those reporting, the range is 66,500 to $70,000. So that's just a good idea for you to know of, nuclear engineers who are graduating from RPI, what the average salary is and what the range is. I did some further information to see the overall median pay for nuclear engineers in 2019. So the median pay, which just to kind of give an example, is 50% of the population makes more than this number, and 50% of the population makes less than this number. But this is just a good idea of what nuclear engineers are making. And when I say 50% of the population, I mean 50% of nuclear engineers. So the median pay is 113,460. So this could be a good number to think about as earning potential, right? So, this might not be what you're offered right after graduation, but as you go through your professional career, this could be something to work towards. I also wanted to look up, the average salary for nuclear engineers in the Albany Capital Region area, and I used Glassdoor for that, which is one of the resources that we recommend to students when they're trying to get an idea of salary. And the average was $77,000 per year for salary. So this is just some information on salary hiring, things you can look for as you are going on to your full-time positions whenever you do graduate. So just to, I'm going to kind of segue a little bit about our office and what we can do for you. These hiring statistics, like been talking about, they're all on our website. You can view that full report on our website, but we can also work with you to create your resume, cover letter, do some mock interviewing. Maybe you're thinking about grad school, and so we can work with you on if grad school is the right decision and at the application for process for grad school. We can also help you explore majors or even more specifically, different careers within those majors. And we can also talk to you about salary. So we do a lot with salary negotiations for students who are graduating and being offered positions. And so we can be contacted at ccpd@rpi.edu. You can also make an appointment through Handshake. As I've mentioned before, Handshake is really a great way to engage with our office. All of our services are offered virtually in the fall, so that is something to note. We are not in the office, and that's why Handshake is so important right now because that is the main way to be able to engage with us. And as I mentioned, there are three counselors who work for the School of Engineering. So myself, Emily Stiles, and then Lindsay Debner and Kristen Kettering. So it's possible you've met with myself or Lindsay or Kristen before, and you can meet with any one of us moving forward. So I just wanted to give you that information as well. And please feel free to email any of us at any time if we can support you. I also wanted to give a brief plug about an upcoming event. So we have an engineering networking night coming up next week on October 14th. It's at night, it's from 5:30 to 7:30, and again, it's virtual. It's actually through Handshake itself. And so these events, there is a series. So the first is the engineering, and it's designed to provide you with some networking opportunities that will allow you to meet with different employers in the industry. And it can be through group or one-on-one sessions. The employer actually decides how they want to interact with students. And so, as I mentioned, this is a series. So, the first one is engineering, but I encourage you to look at the other industries that will be having a networking night. Just because you're in the School of Engineering doesn't mean you can't potentially explore some other companies within different industries. So the way to get involved with this event is to RSVP through Handshake. And then once you RSVP, you need to go in and sign up for specific one-on-one and group sessions. And when you do that, you can view the companies that are going to be attending and the different forms of sessions that they will be having. So I definitely encourage everyone here to try to attend this event if they're available. So that's kind of the end of my formal presentation. I'm not too sure how I'm doing on time, but we might have some time for questions.
Yeah, we do. We actually have just a
Okay.
couple minutes for questions. So if anyone wants to take advantage of Emily sitting in the room and has any questions, throw them in the chat. Or, in this situation, I'd say if you're a little bit brave and you just want to unmute your mic to ask a question, go for it. We do have just a little bit amount of time, but enough for a question or two.
Emily, I'm going to bite. It's Marie. Thank you for
Hi.
being here tonight. I'm wondering if you could talk. I'm so glad you're having that networking event.
Mhm,
It's something that we try to talk to students about a lot, and I think a lot of undergrads aren't that familiar with networking. And so I'm
mhm,
wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that concept, especially for a relatively small major like nuclear engineering, which has a
mhm.
community where it seems like everyone knows everybody else. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about why that would be an important thing, especially in a major like this.
Yeah, absolutely. So networking is a really great way to, I'll say, expand your connections, right? And so in the professional field, as Marie was saying, especially in smaller fields, people tend to know each other, which means they might tend to talk about different, opportunities at different companies or kind of what's new in the industry. What are some industry trends? You know, what are the best practices, things like that. And so having a large network can not only just add to your knowledge on the industry, but it can also help you learn about new opportunities in terms of employment. So as students, you can network with RPI alum, so for example, you might be meeting some new alum here or seeing alum that you've shared classes with in the past. It's great to connect with them to learn more about the companies they're working for. Um, you know, what are some of the skills and qualities that companies are looking for in a successful candidate for a nuclear engineering position? Is it valuable to go to graduate school as a nuclear engineer? These professionals in the field have the best information on that because they're working in it, they're in that industry every day and they can share that information. And especially right now, because we are in such a virtual environment with the pandemic, networking through LinkedIn, so sending those messages, going to these online, virtual networking events or even like career fairs or information sessions, whatever it may be, connect with those individuals after because you're showing your interest and that person might think of you when they have a job open up because they know you're a nuclear engineer interested in a particular sort of position, right? So it's a great opportunity to just add to your knowledge base, but to also kind of put yourself out there as a great candidate for a position potentially.
Thank you so much, Emily.
Mhm.
That's totally on the dot for time, which is
Perfect.
pretty
Okay.
awesome. What's happening? So again, thank you so much. We really appreciate having you here. Um,
Absolutely.
just as Emily mentioned before, her email will be in the contact information, or sorry, in the her contact information will be in the email I send out tomorrow, as well as the slides that she shared with us. And yes, we are recording this, so there will be a recording available. And that I'm gonna let you guys know I'm a little bit behind in terms of editing and getting them up on YouTube, but I'm hoping to get them all done this week. So you'll be able to have that as a resource too. So thanks so much, Emily.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
You too. Okay, so now we're gonna switch gears. So I'm gonna ask my friend and my boss, Marie Diefenbach, to show herself. And she will introduce our panelists. And again, these are alumni and current student. So they will begin our formal Q&A section. And as you hear things that you have questions about or want to, even hear more about, throw it in the chat room and we'll get to it.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristen. I just want to welcome everybody tonight. I see a lot of names of first-year nuclear engineering students who I've met with so far. Welcome. Thank you for coming. I know some of us have had some good discussions throughout the summer. I also know we have some undeclared students here. So for our panelists and for people like Chase who are on campus, go get them, recruit them to the dark side of nuclear. I'm really happy always for this event every year because I get to visit with some alums who I don't get to see very often. So as Kristen said, I do advise this year's nuclear engineering class and last year's and the year before that and the year before that. I also advise the aero students. So I actually have a couple of crazy students, one or two every year, who want to do a dual with aero and nuclear. And after I tell them what that involves, some of them go through it and some of them don't. But I'm happy to explore any conversations about duals, minors, anything like that. I know Kristen will provide my contact information in the email she sends out tomorrow, and I'm welcoming all of you to get in contact. So no more about me. I'm super excited to welcome our guests, and I'm going to ask Nick and Juliana and Chase to also unmute themselves and put on their cameras so we can see their lovely faces as well. Thank you. One of the great things about working here and advising nukes for 20 years is I get to know all these lovely people and visit with them when they come back to campus. And Nick and I have probably known each other way longer than either one of us really wants to admit tonight. And I'm super happy to have all of you here. First, just really quickly, I'm going to ask each of you, we'll start with Juliana. I just want a brief introduction, name, where you work currently, where you're from originally and where you live now, and your degree. And we'll start with Juliana, then we'll go to Nick, and then we'll go to Chase.
All right, so hi everyone. I'm Juliana Van Doren. I currently work at Exelon Nuclear. It's a power utility company, specifically at the Peach Bottom location, which is in southern Pennsylvania. I am originally from Frederick, Maryland, but I am currently living in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I graduated last year from RPI with my degree in nuclear engineering.
Awesome. Thanks, Juliana. All right, Nick.
All right. So my name is Nick Thompson. I grew up in Long Island and then, of course, came to RPI. And now I am working in Los Alamos and living in Los Alamos in New Mexico. It's a really cool place, lots of mountains. It's great. When I was at RPI, I did my bachelor's, master's, and PhD, all in nuclear engineering at RPI. And I think it's 12 years, Marie, that we've known each other.
That's a very long time, Nick.
Yes.
I've loved every minute of it, my friend.
Yeah.
Okay, Chase, it's up to you. Your name, don't need to know where you work because I know you're in your dorm room right now, and where you're from, and I know where you live now because you're in Troy.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'm Chase Olson. I'm a current senior here at RPI. I'm doing nuclear engineering as well, and I'm from Vail, Colorado. So a lot of mountains, Nick says, but also a lot of mountains in Colorado. So about it.
Awesome. So I just want to start really basic and ask each of you what made you decide to major in nuclear engineering, because not everyone here has declared a major yet. And I know over the years, students have given various reasons. So I'm always curious as to what made you, go for that particular major, especially nuclear, when some parents freak out when you mention it. So we'll go in the same order, Juliana and Nick, and then Chase.
Okay, so for me, I got discovered nuclear, I guess you could say I think it was my sophomore year of high school. I was in a chemistry class and we were learning about radioactive decay, and I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And so I did some more research. I watched a lot of documentaries and stuff, and I'm like, ooh, this seems like something I want to do. And then later in my high school career, I started taking a lot more advanced math and science, and I got to see the different relationships that would have with nuclear engineering. And so when I applied to college, I'm like, this is what I want to do, and I'm really glad that I did.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. How about you, Nick?
Where I grew up in Farmingdale, New York, and they used to have a really big like aeronautical base of like engineering there. Lots of different planes were designed there and whatnot. So when I came to RPI, I wanted to be an aero engineer. I started out as an aero, and I liked it. It was cool. But I also took an intro class into nuclear engineering, and just learning about all the different concepts and all the different ways that you could apply it. It just seemed so interesting to me. So after that one class, I decided I'm going to change my major. So that was still during freshman year, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of the classes that you take in freshman year, they're all transferable for the most part. So you don't really lose much time. So then I transferred into nuclear, and loved it ever since.
Wow, I did not remember that you had started out as an aero. Was it the
Yeah.
1 credit intro to nuke class?
Yeah.
That got you in? Wow,
Yeah.
that's good to know.
Yeah.
So for the undeclared students, there is a 1 credit introduction to nuclear engineering class, and it's only offered in the spring now. It used to be the fall. So if you're interested enough in what you hear tonight and just want to kind of dip your toe in it, I highly recommend it. There's not a lot of work involved. Different members of the nuclear faculty will come in and talk about their areas of research and their area of expertise. So stick that in the back of your head if it's something you might want to explore a little bit more of. There are also other 1 credit classes like Intro to Aero, and there's a bunch of them, and I'm sure Kristen has talked to you about them. But stick that in the back of your head, because holy smokes, Nick liked it so much he went and got a PhD. So it must have been something really good in that class. And Chase, what made you declare nuclear, my friend?
I was pretty similar to Juliana, where like sophomore year of high school, I just thought the nucleus was really cool and thought nuclear science was really cool. The kind of why for it though would be, I think that nuclear energy is kind of the future of energy, really. If we're talking really far future, or maybe hopefully closer, is fusion. And that would be a huge uplifting thing for humanity and whole, I believe. But even right now, fission energy is the best. My opinion, maybe it's biased. It's the best option for carbon-free electricity, which we need to start making a switch. And people, I think it's just, like I said, the energy of the future. So I want to be part of that.
Awesome. I think we can all use a little uplifting these days, Chase. So I'm all about uplifting, my friend. So now I want to switch gears and talk a little bit first for Juliana and Nick about your current job. So what does your day-to-day look like? What do you work on every day when you go into the office? What does your company or your organization work on? What is cool about what you do? Like, what kind of are you excited about going into every day? And is there any least favorite part of your job? And then after they answer about their current jobs, Chase, I'm going to kind of ask you to talk a little bit about your co-op at Framatome as well, so you're not out of this conversation. So Juliana, tell us a little bit about your day-to-day job and what you like and what might not be great.
So my day-to-day job is at a power plant. So there's a lot of industrial type things and processes going on. What I currently do, I'm a strategic engineer. So that means I'm working mostly in the systems side. So pretty much my group works on anything that touches the nuclear water. And since I work at a boiling water reactor, lots of things touch that water. So my main role when I go into the office, I would be looking at different parameters and trends. If something were to come up, I would be involved in the troubleshooting teams. I would go on walk downs. That's basically going into the plant and looking at your system, looking at all the different pieces of it and making sure that everything looks the way it's supposed to and is performing the way it's supposed to. And then mainly another thing is a big part of my job is I own a system. So basically what that means is I am the person who anything that goes on in the plant that affects my system, I'm the one that has to advocate for the resolution. I have to advocate for the different types of maintenance that need to go on during that and the frequency of it, and just basically taking ownership of the systems that I own in the power plant and making sure that they're taken care of is my day-to-day. And then one of the not so great things is you have to do a lot of training because the NRC requires you to be qualified. So there's a huge portion of my job that is required training and taking exams. They're not nearly as hard as anything that I've dealt with in college, but they are a lot of high stakes exams because you need to pass them in order to continue working at your job. But yeah, pretty much.
So then you're saying you're studying and your homework is not done, even though you're out of RPI.
Yeah, you still have to do training and studying and different tests once you leave, but yeah.
Now, do you ever have to work like lots of hours, Juliana, for when you do refueling or anything like that? Do you get on those kind of wild schedules sometimes?
Yeah, so our refueling outage is coming up in about a week and a half. And so you have to work 12-hour shifts 6 days a week for about 2 or 3 weeks, depending on the length of the outage. But it is crazy schedules during that time because basically what we want to do is spend as least time offline as possible, because when we're not creating megawatts, we're not creating money, which is very important. But during that time, there's probably 20 different projects going on with maintenance and upgrades to the plant. So you're working pretty much full force, like 2.5 weeks to get everything done that you need to get done during that outage. So yeah, and then you're also on call a couple weeks a year where you have to be within a certain radius and go in if something goes wrong.
Wow. I guess I'm thinking though that semester where you take like PNR and NPSC and those kind of maybe trained you a little for, not sleeping a lot, I'm guessing.
Yeah, pretty much.
So Nick, tell us a little bit about the day-to-day at Los Alamos and what are you personally involved in and what does Los Alamos work on?
Los Alamos does a little bit of everything. About 2/3 of the lab is related to nuclear weapons, both weapons and non-proliferation. I don't really work on the weapons side. What my group does is we actually have 4 small reactors that we can do small demonstrations on. So we can put together all sorts of different materials and whatnot. And so if somebody wants to build some crazy reactor design, they can actually come to us and then we can work with them. Or if there is like a safety concern, then they can bring that to us and we can design a system to try to test both the nuclear data and the actual simulation codes to see if you're actually getting the right results, basically. So one of the most interesting experiments recently, some people might have heard of it, a lot of people won't, but it's called Krusty or Kilopower. And it was actually a space reactor that was designed with NASA. And we got to actually demonstrate it, bring it up to power at 800 degrees Celsius, run it for 28 hours, increase and decrease the power and everything. So it's something that eventually could go on base on Mars or on the moon or something. So pretty cool. Yeah.
Very cool.
As for my day-to-day, a lot of it right now is simulations, some training. When we actually go out to the experiments, they moved everything out to Nevada a few years ago. So we actually fly out and then, you drive out like 5 in the morning and, you're there all day. But, that is fun too, to actually get your hands on and get to actually perform the experiments and operate the machines and everything. So, but a lot of it is simulations, documentation, things like that. And then I guess what I don't like, right. I mean, right now you don't get to see anybody because of COVID, but that's kind of everywhere. So, um, I guess another thing is, when you're traveling, like, you're away from, your house and family and everything, which I kind of like sometimes, but it can get a little tiring if you're, a few weeks in a row. So I guess that's one thing that I don't like. Yeah.
Now, Nick, to work at a national lab like Los Alamos, do they only hire people with PhDs, or are there people with differing? Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of the kind of researchers, scientists, a lot of them are PhDs. Some of them have their masters. In my group in particular, I think it's probably half masters, half PhDs. But it kind of varies from group to group. But then there's a lot of just also like engineers that we need for things, technicians, people to actually run certain things, to design certain systems, to do other analysis. And a lot of times those people have bachelor's degrees. You don't need, a PhD to be doing some of that analysis. So there's a big mixture in the lab. And like I said, the lab does a little bit of everything. So even just biology, chemistry, material science, is a really, really wide swath of things that go in the lab.
And about how many employees are at Lake Lano?
Full-time employees is 12,000. And then on a normal summer, they'll bring in 1,300 students.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's a good place to look for an internship.
Yeah, definitely.
And you are
And the
your own
internships are open
city.
now. Say
And
again?
and you're your own city for with that many people, right?
Yeah, it's pretty weird, because you have the lab that has 12, 13,000 people depending on the month, and then the actual town itself has like 13,000 people. So a lot of people do live outside of the town of Los Alamos. Some people live in Santa Fe, and there's a few other small towns nearby. But yeah, it's pretty crazy because like you just meet your neighbor and like, oh, this person works at Lano, and this person, and their wife, and this person, So yeah,
Very small community for sure.
it's fun.
Thank you. So, Chase, you did a co-op internship co-op at Framatome, and I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about that. How did you get the internship? What did you do while you were there? And would you recommend that company to our students who are maybe looking for, internships and jobs?
Yeah, so I worked there for 7 months. That's, with the Arch. So I took, summer classes, took fall classes, took my spring off. And so I was working spring and this summer. So 7 whole months, which is really cool and really fulfilling. It was definitely better, in my opinion, than 2 separate internships, but that's personal preference, I guess. So I got the connection to my supervisor through American Nuclear Society. They came in and did an information session with ANS, and I just pretty much emailed them and got an informal interview and then an interview with them. And so it was kind of a connection that I made through ANS. While I was there, I was a neutronics engineer, which neutronics engineers, the neutronics team, they're the ones who design and license fuel cycles for nuclear reactors, which fuel cycle is like 2 years. And it's, you burn up fuel and then you take about a third of the core out and then reload it. Juliana was just talking about downtime, which that's when a refueling would happen. So a neutronics engineer is the person who's designing the fuel and pretty much certifying to the NRC that yes, this fuel is safe. And you also have to go through a bunch of different analyses that prove if this accident happened, the fuel wouldn't get damaged, or if this happened, the fuel wouldn't get damaged. That's pretty much what they do. Outside of that, they also do a lot of things to keep Framatome competitive as a fuel provider. They just have a bunch of smaller projects that they work on. And would I recommend it? Yeah, it was really cool to be able to see the industry side. It was well paying, and also I hope to kind of form a relationship with them in RPI. They're coming back in this, I think in a couple weeks to give that same presentation that I got, and hopefully provide connections for people to continue to get internships and co-ops with them. And I worked in Washington State, so other side of the country. They also have a Virginia location, which hires a little bit more. And there's, the Virginia location does pressurized water reactors, and the Washington does boiling water reactors. So lot of opportunity in them, and I hope to keep them coming back.
That's awesome. Chase, you're like a plant. You're like segueing right into my next question. Well done you. I wanted to talk a little bit about professional organizations, specifically ANS. And I mean, I think, Nick, you're practically a walking advertisement for ANS. That's why I always thought about you. And I'm wondering if, each of you can talk a little bit about your involvement with ANS, if you were involved as a student at RPI, if you're still involved. I know Chase is an officer this year, so obviously he is. And what are the advantages of becoming involved, other than, of course, the networking you talked about? If you could talk a little bit about maybe scholarships, conventions, opportunities that would be open to students as a result of that, and why is it important? If anybody wants to speak about why it's important, feel free to do that. So we'll mix it up this time. We'll start with Chase because he's active right now and he's an officer, and I get his emails, I know. So we'll start with Chase for a change, and then we'll go to Nick, and we'll go to Juliana.
Yeah, so right now, like you said, I hold 2 e-board positions. They're kind of smaller. I'm the treasurer and the communications chair, so that's why you get the emails from me. My freshman year, I was still involved in the club, but I held like a lower level position, which was the outreach chair, which is an e-board, but it's still a position in the club. I'm also involved in Women in Nuclear, which Juliana can speak a little more on. But yeah, getting involved with professional societies are really important. It's a good thing to continue to move up and get involved, to broaden your connections, broaden who you can talk to, who you can meet in industry. Even in an event like this, meeting Nick, just it continues to provide opportunity to you.
Yeah. And I think that's always been one of the strengths of the nuclear program, being relatively small and being very clued into ANS, and how, there's not a lot of professional organizations that like have meetings and just bring these companies in to meet directly with their students, and that all these companies are directly looking to meet with the students. And it's very easy to become involved in that, So Nick, talk about some of the things that you've been involved with ANS
Sure.
over the years.
Yeah, I've kind of been in a lot of different positions with the American Nuclear Society. When I was a student, I was a student member first, and then I eventually became the president of the RPI ANS chapter, which was a lot of fun. So that was really interesting to get to meet a lot of different people. And then also as a student, I got to go to a lot of the actual national and student meetings as well, which if you get the chance to go, it really, really helps you to meet all sorts of people in the industry. Also, just learn all the different ideas that are going on in the industry, what people are working on, what's important. And I made so many good friends that, I still talk with on a regular basis, even today, that I've known for, a decade or so. So it was just a really, really great opportunity, when I was a student. And then after I was a student, I actually continued to stay involved. I became the chair of the Young Members Group for the American Nuclear Society. Now I think I'm on a few committees still, but I've definitely tampered down my involvement a bit. But I'll be at the next meeting virtually because, it's a virtual national meeting. But yeah, I still try to stay pretty involved in the American Nuclear Society and the things that are going on. So, yeah.
No surprise there. Thanks, Nick. And Juliana, were you involved in Women in Nuclear when you were at RPI?
Yeah, I was actually had several positions in Women in Nuclear, and currently I think WIN, or Women in Nuclear, WIN, is working pretty closely with ANS at RPI to kind of bring a united front for the students in the nuclear programs and all students, just because it's a great way to get involved with industry. And so with WIN, there's a lot of different professional conferences that you can go to and different events that you can be a part of. I actually got my first internship with Exelon when after my sophomore year, by going to a regional conference at Penn State and meeting my future manager and making that connection. So Women in Nuclear is something that the membership for it nationally is free, and they give a lot of credence to like outreach and really trying to do education and lifting up women in the nuclear industry. But anyone can join. There's no requirement to be a woman to be in Women in Nuclear. And I've continued to stay involved with our Peach Bottom chapter of Women in Nuclear. And recently, Peach Bottom and RPI both won awards at the national conference, which I've also attended the national conference, which is a really good opportunity to, again, do that networking. And I can't suggest enough that going to these professional conferences opens so many doors for you and really allows you to network in industry and learn so much.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's really important. And again, one of the nice things about the nuclear field being kind of relatively small. I mean, I used to go to those conferences back in the day to recruit for our graduate program. And, you know, all the important employers would be there. The grad schools would be there trying to recruit undergrads. And I mean, I used to see students, to your point, just get interviewed right on the floor of the conference, you know, for an internship for that following summer. And I mean, where do you ever go where it's that easy in a sense? You know, you have an employers there who want to hire you, you know? So yeah, thank you all for that little pitch. We are not getting any sponsorship from ANS. I want to make clear, but I just think it's a great opportunity for our students. And if you're not involved, you can probably contact Chase and he'll get you on their email distribution list. Kristen's going to send out an email tomorrow with his contact information. So I'm sure he's happy to add you to that distribution list, and you'll just know about upcoming events and programs and things like that. Just a couple of like short answer questions. I'm curious, did any of you have a favorite class at RPI that you want to talk about, or a favorite teacher that you want to talk about? I'm super curious if any of them are in the nuclear department. So we'll start with Chase because his memory is probably good because he's here right now. Did you have a favorite class? Doesn't have to be a nuclear, or a favorite teacher you can recommend to anybody who's looking to go into that field?
I would say just Nuke Phenom, which is the first class you're going to take as a nuclear engineer. That's your first, major specific, and just because it was really cool, it's your first true introduction to more in-depth nuclear science, and it's really cool. So that was my favorite class, I would say.
Not surprising. I've heard that one before. How about you, Nick?
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys are still doing it because of the reactor, but Crit Lab was definitely one of my favorites. But I think the other thing that I really enjoyed and got one of the most value out of was just doing undergraduate research at the linear accelerator. Are you guys doing the lab at the accelerator yet? Okay, so I think that's would probably be my favorite class if I was there right now.
That's a good one. That's certainly a good one. How about you, Juliana? Did you have a favorite class?
So mine is going to be a little off the rails here. It's technically a mechanical class, but my favorite class was Thermals and Fluids 2, which I guess a lot of people don't like, but I just have the kind of brain that really worked for me, and I loved it. I took it with Professor Borka Tashuk, who's really great. I learned so much, and it's actually really helped with what I'm doing now since I'm a little bit more in the system side. But yeah, I also enjoyed Applied Atomics and Nuclear Physics, which is taught by Emily Liu. It's a great class. It's super really cool project where you can pretty much do whatever research you want to do into anything with nuclear that I really enjoyed doing. So those were probably my two favorite classes, but yeah.
That's great. I like to hear thermals because a lot of students are like, oh, thermals. I love that you just never know what people are going to answer. Chase is disagreeing. He's like, no way. So for students who are thinking about nuclear, Applied Atomic would be one of your nuclear engineering technical electives that you actually get to choose. So it's not a required class. You have a couple of classes that you get to choose from a whole bunch of electives, depending on what you're really kind of interested in, and sometimes depending on who the teacher is, quite honestly, right? You know, you want to take more of Emily Lou, which I can 100% understand for sure. So, so I'm going to go a little out of order, Nick, because you already brought up the undergraduate research. And so that kind of segues into a little bit. I want to talk to you a little bit about your decision to pursue a PhD. And I think a lot of undergrads may have heard about undergraduate research, but they probably don't have a concept that the good and the bad is that you can get sucked into staying for a PhD if you do research with someone and you do a good job. And I also think that a lot of students don't realize that if you want to pursue a PhD, that you don't have to pay for it if you're a good student, and how that works. So I'm wondering if you could talk about your personal journey and to decide from URP to PhD.
Yeah. So when I started at RPI, again, I didn't even know that nuclear engineering was a thing that I could really do, you know? And so then I obviously changed majors, and eventually along the way, I asked Dr. Danone if I could do research with him. And he does a lot of research at the accelerator related to nuclear data. It's basically, what is the probability that a neutron interacts with something? So I started to do research. I did a summer URP, undergraduate research project with Dr. Danone. And that was a lot of fun. Learned a lot of different things about nuclear, but also about all the electronics and detectors and tons of different things. And so I continued doing that in the fall and spring. And then after that, I actually did a summer internship at Knowles Talk Power Lab. And being at Knowles Talk Power Lab, I realized that I really liked the work that was going on at Knowles. I didn't necessarily want to be at Knowles forever, but I really did like the work that they were doing. But the other thing it made me realize is I was surrounded by a lot of people with masters and PhDs. And I was kind of toying with the idea of, do I want to get a PhD? Do I not want to? And so between my research and also being at Knowles for the internship, I decided, you know what, I'm going to try to get the PhD. Now, at that point, I'd already started the co-terminal program. That was the combined bachelor's master's program. And so after I finished my master's, I started a PhD at RPI. You still have to apply and everything, but if you know the professor and you've been working with the professor and the professor likes you, then usually it's pretty easy, to get involved, to get in. So when you're a PhD student, like Marie said, if your advisor has funding, if you're a good student and it's engineering, then usually your tuition is paid for and you get a stipend on top of that. So as a grad student, you're making 20-something thousand a year, which isn't a lot, but I mean, you can eat and go out and have fun and whatnot. So you're not starving or anything. And you're getting a PhD as well, and your tuition is covered, which is a really, really great opportunity. Now PhDs, they kind of vary in length. Sometimes it takes people 4 years, sometimes it takes people 5, 6, 7. It's really, really variable. I think it depends a lot on the project, on the student, on the professor. But if that's something that you're at least a little bit interested, then definitely take a look into it. Try to talk to other people who are doing their PhD or have done their PhDs, and try to get a feel for if it's something you want to do. Yeah.
And you don't have to. Staying at RPI is certainly an option,
Yeah.
but we've had plenty of students graduate from RPI and go on to places like MIT and Michigan and Georgia. And we've had students go all over the place. So it's certainly a great option because the players, the research, the culture, all of that. You might meet your wife here, Nick Thompson. You don't know if you stay for a PhD, right? I mean, you never know. So you don't have to stay at RPI, and there's different ways of doing it, right? some students start working on a master's and then, oops, they just end up with a PhD. Or sometimes, students will start working on a PhD and say, nah, I'm kind of good with a master's, So, there's no contract signed in blood, right? Even with Dr. Danone. So, you have the option of, changing your mind at some point, during that process, right? I want to ask Juliana, did you do research while you were at RPI as an undergrad? And if so, who'd you work with?
I did not do research. I took more of the internship path than research.
Sure. Well, you had the great good fortune of getting an internship after sophomore year, which a lot of students don't, right? So, I totally understand that, because why would you not go and have that industry experience if you can get it? Chase, did you do URP during your time here? I can't remember.
Yeah, so on my summer arch semester, just because I'm not sure, you are the advisor, I guess I could ask this question. You guys seem to have remade the nuclear engineering degree curriculum around the arch, because when I took my arch summer semester, it was a very light semester. It was very relaxed. It was summer, taking a couple classes on the side, and then I threw some research in on the side as well. And I did that with Emily Liu, and it was on molten salt, and the project itself was applied to concentrated solar farms. But kind of in the side, why it's nuclear is molten salt is a idea for coolant and moderator and fuel for a nuclear reactor. So I did a little bit, and it's pretty cool.
Cool. So do you have a goal? Is your plan to go right into industry after you finish undergrad, Chase, or are you looking at a graduate degree at all?
Yeah, so after going to Framtome and seeing industry and, also having a little research side, it kind of fits, I loved industry because you work 9 to 5, or in Juliana's case, sometimes you're working 12-hour shifts, but once you're done, you're done. You get to hang up the hat and you kind of get to relax. Whereas, when you're in classes or even with the research, it felt like, you had a deadline, and it was kind of on you to figure out how, when you're doing stuff, and it kind of had that ever-present thing in the back of your mind. But in the end, I'm thinking I'm going towards grad school, because that's, where I want to go forwards in my life, I guess, really.
And what's if you had a dream job, Chase, what would be your dream career, your dream job?
Really, something to do with fusion, which in this current time might be either in research side of it, or the actual building, but that's more magnets and whatnot. So we'll see. Dream job, maybe working in Boston at Commonwealth Fusion Systems. That they do stuff. So we'll see.
Very cool. Very cool. So all of these students at some point, due in part to the summer arch now, we don't really give them a choice. They're going to be looking for internships. They're going to be looking for co-ops. And either based on your own experience, or even being on the other side in industry and in national labs, what kind of advice can you give to students on, how to set themselves up for an internship? What's the best way to find one? Any advice you want to share to all of these students who will definitely be looking at that within not too long? So we'll start with Juliana, and then we'll go to Nick, and then we'll go to Chase.
Yeah, so again, with internships and co-ops, I would assume getting them is probably the hardest part. And in order to do that, you really, really have to put yourself out there. You have to just, if you're shy, I'm a pretty shy person, so it was definitely hard for me professionally to be confident and talk to people and say, hey, what are you working on? I'm interested in this. And so for me, that was going to conferences with WIN. The regional conferences for WIN are a little smaller, and you have more of a chance to really talk to people one-on-one. But it's really about making connections and trying to show interest to the people who would be maybe hiring in those internships and co-ops, and really showing that you're interested and showing that you're going to be dedicated to working hard and really reaching out to get those opportunities.
That's great. And it is, it's hard for us to brag about ourselves, I think, like I think getting into that head where you are just bragging about yourself, because that's kind of what it seems like when you're networking and interviewing, that's not a natural thing for us to do, I think, so I think taking advantage of the Career Center when they do mock interviews, and even sometimes ANS will definitely bring in employers, and having those informal conversations, right? You just get a little bit more comfortable, I think, in talking about yourself. And I think just any practice you can do in those terms is really great, because I'm an old lady, I still find that hard to do. It's just not what we're programmed to do, right? Nick, any advice for students on internships and co-ops and things?
Yeah. So right now, I'm not, in charge of hiring or anything like that. But I do look at a lot of resumes. I actually did the career fair the other week,
Cool.
for Lionel. So I got to meet a ton of great students as well. I guess for me, one of the things, the things that I would suggest, when you're applying to a job, make sure you know exactly what the job is. If there's a cover letter or something, try to make sure you hit, what are the desired and required skills, I think anything you can do to make yourself look more attractive is always going to be better, right? So if you can learn a little bit more programming, then that helps so much. And, if you can get an undergraduate research position and you can show that you've done research in the field, that helps. Literally every little thing that you can do, it helps a little bit more. If you can learn MCMP, I don't know when you guys learn MCMP, but that's a code that simulates nuclear reactions. That's a really good skill to have for nuclear engineers. So different things like that will definitely help you. And then just reach out to people. Like Julian was saying, the more people you can reach out to, the better your odds are going to be. So yeah.
That's great. And Chase, since you're a current student, I know that like Tom Haley back in the day taught like a specific technical elective in MCMP. What do you get it in as part of the curriculum in other courses now?
So right now the classes that teach MCNP are radiation technology or radiation measurement and instruments. Maybe that's not the exact name. I took that sophomore year, and then uh, just thinking of Tom Haley, they also made a new coding class.
Right.
This is just a general main, but that's what the nukes take, and that was really cool as well, because what I heard of CS1 or other classes that we would have taken previously, it was a little bit more about the coding, but this class, you learned Python, but then you also got to see it applied to engineering problems, which was it made it feel a lot more valuable as an engineer for sure.
Oh, that's great. That's really good, because it's still a fairly new class and I'm not getting a ton of feedback yet on that. So that's really good to know. More programming is better than less, right? And forever and ever, all nukes took was that kind of BS 6-week class, right? Beginning programming. So beefing it up to this full 3-credit class where you not only learn to program in Python, but you use it to solve engineering problems. I think, while it doesn't, necessarily cover MCMP, at least get you thinking in that, the goal is that that class has you look at programming as kind of a tool in your engineer's toolbox, right? And I don't think that was ever kind of integrated that well before, with just what the small amount of programming that students did. So I'm glad to hear that you found that valuable, Chase. That's great. So Chase, any from your perspective as someone who has recently, come back from co-op, and obviously, the networking through ANS was a huge help for you. Any other things that any other advice you can give to students based on either you or your friends, or, what you got from the Frame It to Home folks?
I would say definitely, first thing is professional society. If you choose to come nuclear, ANS and WIN are going to be really helpful. If you choose not to, every other degree should hopefully have a professional society on campus that represents them. It depends on, how involved everybody is in it, but, nuclear is a pretty small group and we have a pretty active chapter. So I would hope that other degrees have a similarly strong program, but that's really important. building up your resume, and you can have a great GPA and whatnot, but also being involved on campus. So as freshmen, now's your time to get involved in other clubs. You don't have to join 12 clubs, but maybe join 1, 2 that interest you and move up in the club. Show that you have leadership skills, get an e-board position, show companies that you can, not only can do well in school, but also are a leader and or a people person. Other than that, go to the career fair and use Handshake and whatnot. It's got a good way to look for jobs. Sometimes companies don't realize there's a career fair, but there'll still be job posted on Handshake and whatever we used before. But that's what I would recommend.
That's great. I think that's all great advice, and thank you for sharing all of that. So Kristen's given me like a 5-minute warning because we have to leave time for questions from students. And students, I know there's at least one question in there, but please, go right into the chat anytime and put your questions in there so we can have them ready when we're done. So I guess to wrap up, pretty much everybody on this call is a first-year student at RPI. And I think this has been, for me anyway, for students, I think this has been a really tough way to start your academic career, right? You come to RPI, we put you in quarantine, we test the heck out of you for COVID. I think all the clubs are online and there's not a lot of person-to-person connections, obviously. We're all here in our separate places tonight. And so with the benefit of hindsight for each one of you, if you could go back to your being a first-year student at RPI, is there anything you would do differently, or anything that was really meaningful to you that you want to make sure that students try and do as a positive thing, or something that you maybe wish you had done but hadn't? Since Chase is here now and he has the most recent memory of what being a first-year student is like, I'll start with Chase and then I'll go to Nick and we'll finish off with Juliana. And then we'll head to questions, Kristen.
I would say I would have applied myself a little bit more, and I would have done my homework earlier. I would have gotten, for being a freshman, I kind of coasted a little bit, but, and I'd do homework the night before, which, a lot of people do. You'd be surprised, but, doing it even a day earlier definitely relieves the amount of stress that you have based on an assignment being due the exactly next day. But even as you get further, maybe not just your first year, but to keep in mind that as you're going, try to really learn the material. Don't just cram for a test. This is going to be your job, hopefully, right? So start learning the stuff. Once you turn into a sophomore and you're out of the general education stuff, start making sure that you are reading that textbook to learn it, not just cram for, your first midterm or something. That would be my advice to myself.
I think that's great advice, Chase. And man, faculty would be so happy to hear you say start your homework early. Oh my gosh, you would make so many faculty members so happy with that. I love that. Yeah, I think that's all great advice, especially, my gosh, in the nuclear field. You really want to, have that depth of knowledge. There's so much that's so important and riding on you. And, there's, just the consequences are so huge, right? And the pressure can be so huge. So I think that's really good advice. And in general, it's never good to just learn stuff for the test, I would argue, but especially in nuclear engineering. So Nick, anything you want to talk to, freshman Nick about other than Arrow? What were you thinking?
Well, I think Chase's advice is really great, because I do clearly remember, starting some homeworks at 1 a.m. after playing, on the Xbox for a few hours, in freshman year. So I think that's really good advice of starting homework early. Yeah, I think kind of what I said before. You have so many different options at RPI. There's all sorts of different degrees that you can get, all sorts of different clubs that you can take part in. So really, take a look at the course catalog. If there's something that's interesting to you, then just take it. I was interested in nuclear engineering. I took that class and I became a nuclear engineer. And so, and that might not happen to you, but who knows? Maybe you'll just, learn something interesting. I took a class in astronomy. I took a class in civil engineering. There's like these little 1-2 credit classes that, some of them are really, really cool. Yeah, and then all the different clubs and activities too. There's so much that you can do at RPI. So yeah, try to take advantage of all the opportunities you can, and don't try to just pigeonhole yourself real early. Yeah.
I think that's great advice. And I think that you don't realize until you graduate that, while you're here, you're paying all this money and you have access to all these different really smart people and all these classes and everything. And, a lot of times we're so focused on the immediate task of graduating with your major courses, right? And you have those free electives that you can mess around with if you want. You can pass no credit classes. I mean, if you just want to take quantum physics because you always want to learn it, but you don't want it to screw up your GPA, you can do that, right?
Yeah.
And you don't realize until, you graduate and you realize, wow, it's kind of hard to go back to school and do things just for fun now. You just don't have the time, and then you have to pay out of pocket, right? So I think that's really good advice. It's hard to keep in mind when you have so much homework and you have so much going on and you're like, oh yeah, let me learn something new just for fun. Like learning isn't necessarily associated with just for fun at RPI sometimes, right? So it's kind of nice to hear that reminder. So thanks for that. How about you, Juliana? What do you want to talk to freshman Juliana about?
I would say pretty much don't wait to ask for help and go to office hours more. Because I'm going to be honest, I breezed through high school, never studying, never having to work hard, never having to try. And then when I got to RPI, it was a very rude awakening that you have to try and you have to work hard. And one of the things for me was I was afraid to reach out for help because I didn't want people to think I was stupid. So just reach out for help before it gets too late, because as a freshman and when you're first there, things can pile up and then you can get really behind. And just make sure you're reaching out for help. And when you go to office hours, a lot of times the professors will be so willing to help you, and really they make an effort to try their best to get you to understand when you're struggling, and maybe even just giving you moral support, because it is different being in college, especially when you're going from high school to college. It's really important to reach out for help.
And I would argue almost particularly in this environment when classes are online and I think the work is even harder in a lot of senses than when you're in person. And I also think, and Juliana, I think that's such a good point. And I mean, I know 50 and 40-year-olds that haven't gotten the hang of asking for help, right? And it's so important. And if you could not worry about your sense of pride and admit it, which is hard, right? When you've never needed help before. And I kind of think sometimes RPI has a culture of people pretending that they're all doing great, because I'll have a student come in and talk to me about how they just bombed an exam, and then I'll hear them go out into the lounge and somebody asks, what did you think of that exam? Oh, I aced it, and I'm like, I know damn well you didn't, but no one wants to admit that they're struggling, right? So I think that's a really powerful thing, and if we can all kind of get over ourselves and admit that we need help. And I'm the worst offender, so I mean, it's do as I say, not as I do, right, Kristen? Because Kristen can totally verify that. But anyway, I do think it's a really important skill, being someone who has never quite learned it really well. So thank you for all of that advice. So Kristen, I'll turn it over to you, and you've got some at least one chat question, I think, for our guests.
Yeah, we have one chat question, and also can confirm the do as I say, not as I do.
And thank you.
I would also like to chime in on being the same sort of human. Yeah, we have one question. So Leah asked a question about research. Let me pull up my document. She asked, what are some of the major areas of research currently?
Yes, I think I can talk about this a little bit. So one thing that you can do on the American Nuclear Society's website, they have all the divisions listed, and that's where, if there is research that's going on, usually it's going to be in one of those divisions, right? So just a few of them to name them: accelerator applications, aerospace, nuclear science and technology, fuel cycle and waste management, material science and technology, mathematics and computation, nuclear criticality safety, thermal hydraulics, reactor physics, nuclear nonproliferation. So, I mean, you can just, health physics, of course, is another big one, medical physics. so you can just go down the list and see like all those different areas that people are working in. More specifically, one area that I think is pretty interesting and there's a lot of talk about right now is microreactors. There's a lot of interest right now, especially certain small companies, but also the Department of Energy and Department of Defense as well. They're both interested in microreactors. There's a ton of different areas to go in. And then, of course, at RPI, nuclear data is also another big area of interest. So, but those are some of the major ones. Yeah.
Either Chase or Juliana, would either one of you want to chime in on any of that?
I think that question was that was asked during Nick's segment. So I think that was also asking maybe, at LANL, what's going on at LANL a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So at LANL, like I said before, there's a little bit of everything. There's chemical engineering, biological engineering, biology, physics, material science, all sorts of computer science. There's lots of, research in AI and other machine learning techniques going on. Nuclear science as well. Any part of nuclear engineering, there's going to be somebody at least working at the lab on it. There's a lot going on right now. That's yeah. Just one other example is right now, some companies are looking at using different types of moderators. So they're looking at using things like yttrium hydride. And this is a material that hasn't really been used in reactors before. So at LANL, we're actually developing yttrium hydride, and we're going to be doing a critical measurement in a reactor, in one of our test reactors, in a few months with it. And that's going to be the first time it's been in a reactor. So there's a ton of different research out there. Yeah.
It sounds to me, Nick, like one of the good things about working for the government is that they don't have to worry about profit, right? So,
well,
or do they?
So it's a little bit weird, right? I am not actually a government employee. Okay. The lab is run by private companies. Well, in this case, it's private nonprofit, but UC Berkeley and Texas A&M and Battelle. But the government basically figures out, here's all the things that we want to research, right? And then they'll give, people at the labs have to apply for that research funding, and then work with the government for that. Usually you don't have to make profits, but you do have to make sure that the work gets done on time and is done, in budget. You still have some of the same, some similar constraints that you would have in industry. But you do have a lot more flexibility to say, we're going to look at this thing and then bring it to somebody. And if they say, you know what, that sounds like a really good idea, then they can fund it. So, yeah.
Cool. Thanks. Kristen, was there any other questions in the chat?
That's all we've had so far. So if anyone
there's
has
just
any
one more that came up.
Nice, Nicholas. So this question, I'll just read it out loud so we get it on the recording too. What's been the hardest challenge you've attempted in your fields?
Ooh.
Yeah.
All right, Chase, we'll throw it over to you. And I would read that as either, when you were working, or even what's the hardest challenge as an RPI student. We could certainly interpret it that way.
Sure. Hardest challenge, I would say, oh man, everybody's gonna say PNR because that's like the hard nuke class. That was a pretty difficult theoretical class. But I'm gonna say for me it was probably the math, which I always thought I was good at math, but then DiffyQ came around and I had a bit of a time with that. So that was my hardest field. I guess it's not in my field, but
That's
being
good.
a student.
I think it's good for students to look ahead to that. So I think that's super helpful. How about you, Juliana? What's been the hardest challenge you attempted?
So I started working during a pandemic. Starting a brand new job, and I have to work remotely because engineering, we're not technically essential to be on the property of the plant all the time. I can go if I need to do something, but I'm pretty much required to work at home. So it's just been a bit of a challenge trying to adapt to working life from school, especially when your working setup is in your house. And so one of the main things that I've had to do is really learn how to, once I'm done with my day, I need to step away and like stop, because I was so used to college where you're just like, oh, you're on your computer doing work like the majority of the time. So I've been trying to like just adapt to working from home and like joining the industry workforce all in a pandemic. I still haven't met everybody in the team that I'm working with yet. So it's definitely a challenge, like starting anything remotely. So I'd say that's been my biggest challenge so far.
I 100% get that. And I've actually thought about people starting new jobs and like just learning the corporate culture and knowing who the people are, just all of those little things, not that are not so little. I just can't even conceive of it. And we hate not being in the same place, myself and my staff. We really do. And those boundaries, yeah, for sure. I think like one night it was like 12:30 in the morning and my boss and I are emailing in like real time. And I was like, we have got to start setting boundaries. You know what I mean? We both need to get better at it. And so I think that's essential. And that's a really, really good point. And please God, hopefully it will be done at some point. How about you, Nick? You've had a lot of interesting things that you've
Yeah.
done. So what has been your biggest challenge, you think?
Well, I'm gonna give three. Multi-phase flow and heat transfer was the class that was the hardest for me at RPI. I think the second one is just doing my PhD in general. It's was really the first time that you're given a multi-year project that you're in charge of, you have to do, and trying to figure out how to spend your time and get everything done can be really hard and a little bit overwhelming. That was definitely difficult. Also just writing a thesis is hard because I'm not a good writer. And then the third one, which was also fun but also challenging, during my postdoc, I actually got the chance to go over to France and work at IRSN. So it's the Institute for Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety. And so I did research over there for a year, and trying to learn French and be in France and not make a fool of myself and everything, and also work with everyone is speaking French. That was definitely difficult, but it was also just a ton of fun to be over there and to get to travel and meet all sorts of people. So yeah, I think that's the third one. Yeah.
So when you went there, you did not know French?
No, I still don't.
Wow.
I'm still trying to learn. I've got my Duolingo every day, but yeah, because we still work with a lot of those people over in France.
That was a gutsy move.
Yeah, but it was a lot of fun.
Yes, and to live in France, yes, I would think it would be worth it. Kristen, how are we doing on time? We're probably done, right?
We are done. I did not want to interrupt, but we are done.
Awesome.
Very, very good, and I loved the question so much. So
awesome.
Awesome. So thank you again so much to our panelists for joining us tonight to get us more insight to nuclear engineering. You guys had some really wonderful insight. I'm very excited that we all got together for that. Marie, thank you for taking charge of the panel questions and getting the good questions to get the good answers. And of course, students, so happy you were able to join us today. As promised, tomorrow I will be sending that email so that you will get contact information and all the resources that come with it, like CCPD's slides. And hopefully by the end of this week, this recording will be up on the playlist. Just depends upon how long it takes me to do the other two. So
also, if you have any questions about LANL, please get in contact with me. About LANL, about jobs, internships, please get in touch.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicholas, for that. See, guys, Industry Hour can be very helpful.
Yeah, yes, it can. Yes, it can. Network.
Yeah.
Thank you to all. Thank you guys. It was really lovely to see you. And thank you for taking your important time and spending it with our students. It's really, really appreciated.